The afternoon sun began to gild the vast concrete runways of Dulles International Airport. Jet engines roared in the distance as giant planes taxied or lifted off into the sky over western Washington, D.C. Dr. Vivian Hayes squinted, adjusting her Chanel sunglasses as she stepped out of her shiny black Lincoln sedan, which had come to a stop near the stairs leading to a small Gulfstream private jet. She had just finished an important 3-day biomedical conference in the city and was preparing to return home. Her ivory suit was exquisitely tailored, highlighting her well-proportioned figure and healthy tanned skin. Her dark hair was neatly tied back at the nape of her neck, and her face was lightly made up, but still looked intelligent, sharp, and a little tired from the stressful workday. Her leather briefcase and small Celine handbag were placed neatly beside her feet. She smiled at the driver who had opened the door for her and started to walk toward the plane where the crew was waiting. But her steps suddenly stopped. 2 men in dark blue airport security uniforms were approaching her from a small patrol car parked nearby. The first man, about 45 years old, white, with a stocky build, a frowning face, a badge on his chest that read, "Donovan, Supervisor." The second man was younger, also white, with Snyder on his name tag, and looked a little childish and nervous. "Hold on, ma'am," Donovan's voice rang out, dry and authoritative, cutting through the relative silence of the private tarmac. He raised his hand, blocking Vivian's path. "Please stop so we can conduct an additional security check." Vivian froze, her delicate eyebrows furrowing in surprise and confusion. "Additional checks?" she asked, her voice maintaining its professional calm. "I just passed through the crew and VIP security gate a few minutes ago. Everything was fine. Is there anything special, officer?" She looked at the 2 men before her, trying to find a reasonable explanation. "We have intelligence on a suspect with similar characteristics to yours who may be involved in smuggling," Donovan replied, his tone falsely serious, his eyes scanning Vivian from head to toe, lingering long on her expensive clothes and accessories. Snyder stood slightly behind Donovan, repeating mechanically, "Please cooperate with us. This is mandatory security procedure in the restricted area. Suspicious information? Contraband?" Vivian was confused. She was a scientist. Her life revolved around labs and research papers. She had absolutely nothing to do with any of that. "There must be some mistake here. I'm Dr. Vivian Hayes, with the National Institutes of Health. I'm on my way home from a conference." She tried to clarify. "We'll verify that," Donovan said, his voice unfriendly. "Identification, passport, and flight details required." His tone was arrogant, as if she were a criminal caught red-handed. Although she felt extremely uncomfortable and annoyed, knowing that she was in a sensitive security area of the airport, Vivian still tried to cooperate. She opened her bag, took out her passport and the phone containing the electronic flight ticket information. She handed it to Donovan. He took the papers and flipped through them slowly, his eyes never leaving Vivian with a questioning look. Snyder stood beside him, also glancing at the papers, then back at Vivian, his expression somewhat more awkward. This sudden stop, right on the runway, under the curious eyes of the flight crew waiting on the stairs, began to make Vivian feel that something was wrong. This was not like a normal security check. Dr. Vivian Hayes is not only a brilliant scientist in the field of biomedical research, a leading expert in cancer genetics at the prestigious National Institutes of Health, NIH. She is also a woman accustomed to working twice as hard to make her mark in a scientific world still dominated by men and implicit racial prejudices. She is intelligent, determined, and incredibly focused on her work. But there is another side to Vivian's life that few people know about. A secret kept as close to the vest as possible for security reasons and its extremely sensitive nature. She is the wife of Christopher Hayes, the powerful man who serves as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Their marriage was a quiet affair, known only to family, a few close friends, and a few top government officials. Vivian rarely appears with her husband at public events or in the media. She wants to live as normal a life as possible, focusing on her scientific career and away from the trouble and unnecessary attention that her husband's position can bring. Her occasional use of private jets or airport priority services is usually due to her work requirements, urgent international conferences, or sometimes for security reasons related to her husband's position, but she never flaunts it. The white suit she is wearing today is the outfit she used to present at the conference, showing professionalism and respect for the job. In contrast to Vivian's reserved and intellectual image is Airport Security Officer Mike Donovan. He has worked at Dulles for more than 15 years, rising to the position of runway and VIP gate supervisor, but he is always resentful because he feels talented, but not promoted higher. He is jealous of wealthy passengers, those who fly private planes and enjoy privileged services, while he can only watch. Racial prejudice is deeply ingrained in his thinking, especially when he sees successful, wealthy black people. To him, they are lucky, freeloaders, or have achieved their status through illegitimate means. He likes to use his little supervisory power to make things difficult, to bully passengers he does not like, especially when they seem weak or lonely. There were some informal complaints about his attitude, but thanks to clever cover-ups and possibly the protection of some of his superiors, he remained in his position. Security guard Rick Snyder was different. He had only been on the job a few years, was relatively green, and lacked experience in handling complex situations. He was somewhat intimidated by Donovan, his immediate supervisor, and often followed orders without questioning them, even when he sensed something was wrong. He may not have had the same deep-seated racial prejudice as Donovan, but his indecisiveness and desire to please his superiors made him an easy accomplice in wrongdoing. That afternoon, Donovan received an internal radio message about a special attention needed for a well-dressed black woman who might be involved in the illegal transportation of gems or foreign currency via private air. The information was vague, with no specific name or exact flight number, and could have been a rumor or unverified low-level intelligence. But for Donovan, it was the perfect excuse. When he saw Dr. Vivian Hayes step out of the car in a striking white suit and board a private jet, all his preconceptions were aroused. This must be her, he thought. A young, to him, beautiful, wealthy black woman flying in a private jet. To Donovan, she was the epitome of a problematic person. He decided to stop her and check her out, both to satisfy his curiosity and jealousy and to demonstrate his power. He ordered Snyder to go with him. However, when he got hold of Vivian's passport and papers, Donovan quickly realized the terrible mistake. Dr. Vivian Hayes, a scientist at NIH, had a permanent address in an expensive mansion in McLean, Virginia. The flight information was completely legitimate, pre-booked. None of it matched the vague intelligence he had received. His face changed slightly. Snyder, standing next to him, also saw the difference. He nudged Donovan's arm and whispered, "Boss, it doesn't seem like her. The name and profession are completely different." He looked worried, wanting to quickly end the matter and let Vivian go. The mistake was obvious. According to protocol, they were to return the papers, apologize, and let Dr. Hayes continue on his way. But in Mike Donovan's mind, another plan, much darker and more reckless, had just begun to take shape. Instead of admitting the mistake and correcting it, Donovan's eyes flashed with greed as he glanced at Vivian's expensive outfit, the elegant watch on her wrist, and the private jet waiting for her. He saw this not as an unfortunate mistake, but as a golden opportunity to make a profit. A famous scientist, obviously rich, would definitely not want to be troubled or bothered at an airport, especially in a sensitive area like this runway. "Wrong," Donovan said quietly, just enough for Snyder to hear, his voice a little sinister. "But look at this girl, she has plenty of money. Are we going to stop her for nothing?" Snyder turned pale and shook his head. "No, sir. That's illegal. We have to let her go now." But Donovan was determined. He ignored his subordinate's protests. He returned Vivian's passport and papers, but his tone was still patronizing and suspicious. "Your papers appear to be in order," he said, deliberately drawing out his words. "However, your initial approach to us was somewhat uncooperative. And to ensure the safety of the flight, we still need to clarify a few more points of concern." "What else?" Vivian was starting to lose patience and feel really uneasy. "I gave all the information. I didn't do anything wrong. I need to get on the plane now. I'm running late." "We will decide that, ma'am," Donovan said, his voice becoming firmer. "We will ask you to follow us to the private security screening room in the VIP terminal to do so. Snyder, please take Ms. Hayes." "I'm not going anywhere," Vivian protested vehemently. "You have no right to detain me. I demand to see your lawyer or your superiors." "You can see your lawyer later," Donovan growled, moving closer, his demeanor threatening. "But if you don't cooperate now, we'll be forced to take further action and report you for resisting security in a restricted area. Do you want that to happen?" He glanced toward the waiting plane and crew, a silent warning of the embarrassment and trouble she could face. Snyder, though terrified, at Donovan's command and gaze, also stepped forward to stand behind Vivian, forming a pincer movement. Vivian realized she was in a weak position, isolated right on the runway. Making a big deal out of it could cause unnecessary trouble and affect her important schedule. Despite her anger, she forced herself to suppress it, deciding to temporarily comply with their request to see what they would do next. "Okay," she said, her voice cold. "Lead the way." Donovan smirked triumphantly. He motioned for Snyder to go first, and he followed closely behind Vivian, escorting her away from the tarmac and into a deserted hallway that led to the nearby VIP terminal. He chose a small, empty waiting room, motioned for Snyder to stand guard at the door, and closed it, leaving just him and Vivian inside. The air in the room became stifling. Donovan's true colors were now revealed. He crossed his arms and looked at Vivian with a patronizing air. "Listen, Doctor Hayes," he began, his tone changing, losing its false seriousness and becoming smooth and meaningful. "Let's be frank. There was a bit of a mix-up in the initial intelligence. You're not the one we're looking for." He stopped, observing Vivian's reaction. She just stood still, looking at him with sharp eyes, showing no fear, despite the disadvantageous situation. "We should have let you go," Donovan continued, "in the first place. But you see, the fact that you, a renowned scientist, were detained for security checks right on the tarmac, preparing to board a private plane. If this gets out, if the press gets wind of it, it would be a bit of a problem for your reputation, wouldn't it?" He sneered. "People will be curious as to what you did to be detained like that." He moved a little closer. "But we can help you straighten things out. It's simple." He spread his hands. "A small service fee to forget about this mistake and make sure no records are left. It's as if the inspection never happened. How about that?" Vivian looked at him, contempt clear in her eyes. "How much do you want?" she asked bluntly, her voice cold as ice. Donovan smirked, thinking the bait had taken the bait. "Not much, for someone like you. Just $20,000 in cash. Or," he glanced at the elegant Cartier watch on Vivian's wrist and the small but delicate diamond ring on her finger. "If you're not comfortable carrying cash, here are some of these lovely pieces of jewelry. Consider them a thank you gift for your cooperation." Snyder stood outside the door, listening to the conversation inside, his face growing paler. He knew Donovan was committing blatant extortion, but he was too afraid to intervene. Vivian stood there, in the cold VIP waiting room, facing the naked corruption of the representative of the law. She felt a surge of anger and disgust. Being wrongly arrested was enough, now being blatantly blackmailed. She knew she had enough money to pay him and get out of this situation quickly. But doing so would mean abetting the crime, condoning this corruption. Her pride and principles as a scientist, as an honest citizen, would not allow her to do that. After a few seconds of tense silence, as Donovan waited for an answer with a smug smile on his face, Vivian Hayes raised her head. The initial fear had completely disappeared, replaced by a cold determination and anger. Her gaze was fixed on Donovan, sharp and unforgiving. "I will not give you a penny," she said, her voice clear and sharp, echoing in the small room. "And I can assure you, you will pay dearly for your criminal and shameful actions today." Donovan froze, his smile fading. He hadn't expected his seemingly weak prey to resist so firmly. His surprise quickly turned to anger. "Oh? You're stubborn, aren't you?" he growled, taking a step toward Vivian, his demeanor becoming more threatening. "Who do you think you're talking to? You're in our secure area. We can keep you here as long as we want, under any pretense we can. Don't challenge us." "I'm not challenging anyone," Vivian replied, her voice still cold. "I'm just stating the truth. And before you do anything more stupid, before you dig yourself deeper into the hole—" She paused for a beat, looking directly into Donovan's eyes, which were now glaring with anger. "I think you should know who you're messing with." She took a deep breath, then continued, her voice carrying unexpected weight. "I am Dr. Vivian Hayes. Maybe that name means nothing to you. But my husband," she emphasized each word, "is Christopher Hayes." The name Christopher Hayes passed through Donovan and Snyder's ears without making any particular impression. Perhaps they had heard the name somewhere before, but couldn't immediately place it. "Christopher Hayes?" Donovan frowned, racking his brain. "Who was he? Rich? Some official?" He still hadn't realized the gravity of the situation. Vivian smiled coldly, a smile that was not at all amused. "Oh, he's not just some official officer." She spoke slowly, each word distinct, as if carving each word into the other's mind. "Christopher Hayes is the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation." She paused, looking directly into Donovan's eyes, which were beginning to widen. "FBI? You've probably heard of those 3 letters?" She didn't wait for his response. She pulled her phone out of her suit pocket. "Now, do you want me to call him directly to tell him about this interesting misunderstanding? Or do you want me to call your airport security chief first to report the extortion of your subordinate?" The 2 words, FBI director, were like a powerful poison, hitting Mike Donovan and Rick Snyder's nervous systems straight. FBI director. Christopher Hayes. FBI director's wife. The words echoed in Donovan and Snyder's heads like a thunderclap. The air in the small waiting room and the hallway where Snyder stood froze. Every other sound of the airport, the announcements, the engines, the voices, seemed to recede, leaving only the dead silence and the terrible realization of the irreversible mistake they had just made. Mike Donovan's face changed horribly, from anger and arrogance to shock, then utter disbelief, and finally pure horror. The color drained from his face, leaving him a deathly white. His eyes widened, staring at Vivian as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, running down his temples. The walkie-talkie at his waist slipped from his hand and fell to the floor with a dry clang. He stammered, trying to say something, but his throat felt constricted, unable to form words. You are the wife of the director of the FBI. Rick Snyder, standing outside the door, was worse. Hearing Vivian's husband's full title had struck him like a thunderbolt. His legs went weak and shaky, nearly collapsing to the floor. He leaned against the wall to keep from falling, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. He had known Donovan's actions were wrong from the start, but he had not dared to intervene. Now the terrible consequences were upon both of them. They had angered not just a passenger, but the powerful woman behind the head of the most powerful federal law enforcement agency in the country. The brutal truth completely shattered the psychology of the two security police officers. They realized that they not only faced the risk of being disciplined or losing their jobs, but also facing criminal prosecution at the federal level with the FBI itself involved. Their future suddenly became dark and uncertain. Panic set in. Fear overcame all reason. Their attitudes took a 180-degree turn from abusers of power to cowards begging for mercy. Mrs. Hayes, Donovan finally managed to stammer out, his voice trembling, pathetically obsequious. The director's wife. Oh dear God, I'm sorry. 1,000 times I'm sorry. We really didn't know. We really didn't know. This was a terrible mistake, an unforgivable mistake. Please forgive our ignorance. Snyder rushed into the room as well, almost kneeling in front of Vivian. Yes, Mrs. Hayes, please. We are just low-level employees acting on false information. We have no intention of insulting or blackmailing you. Absolutely not. It's just that we're too stressed out with work. Just kidding. Really, just kidding, he pleaded, tears and snot streaming down his face. Donovan fumbled for his keys in his pocket, his hands shaking so much that he dropped the bunch on the floor. He fumbled to pick them up, then hurried over to Vivian, trying to unlock the handcuffs. Here, excuse me. Does your hand hurt? Let me open it. He fumbled so awkwardly that he almost hurt her more. We were so stupid, absolutely stupid. Please don't tell the director about this. Please give us a chance. We swear we won't do it again. The two large men who had been so arrogant and threatening just a moment ago were now trembling, crying, begging for forgiveness from the woman they had so cruelly treated. But this belated remorse could not erase what had happened. The spiral of consequences had only just begun to tighten around them. Vivian Hayes stood there, looking at the two men collapsing before her with cold eyes, without a trace of sympathy. Contempt was written all over her face. She did not respond to their pleas. She just silently raised her phone, dialing a short number saved in her emergency contacts. She didn't call her husband, FBI Director Christopher Hayes. She knew he would be angry and might over-intervene, causing unwanted repercussions. Instead, she called the airport's internal security hotline, or the direct number for the Airport Security Command Office, which she might have been given in advance for special situations. This is Dr. Vivian Hayes, she said into the phone, her voice calm but authoritative. I am in the VIP Security Lounge, International Terminal. I have just been detained by two airport security officers, a supervisor named Donovan and a man named Snyder, under false pretenses of being searched and then attempted to extort money. Please send someone in charge immediately. Her words were short and concise, but powerful enough to cause an earthquake on the other end of the line. The news that the FBI director's wife had been harassed and blackmailed by airport security personnel in a high-security area was an extremely serious incident that could cause a security and diplomatic crisis. The response from the Airport Security Command Center was swift. The red alert was issued. The director of airport security, possibly an airport deputy director of security, along with the head of internal investigations and possibly FBI liaison agents, who are a constant presence at major international airports, were immediately mobilized. Within a few short minutes, the door to the security waiting room where Vivian was being held swung open. A group of men in both high-ranking and civilian uniforms, but with an air of authority, hurried in. The leader, presumably the head of airport security, walked straight toward Vivian, looking worried and apologetic. He glanced at the two officers, Donovan and Snyder, who were standing there, their faces pale, and immediately understood the situation. Dr. Hayes! Mrs. Hayes, the commander said, his voice filled with respect and confusion. This is Commander Miller, in charge of airport security. We are extremely sorry for this unacceptable incident. Please rest assured, we will take this matter very seriously. He didn't need to hear any further explanation from Donovan or Snyder. He turned around, looking at his two subordinates with a look of absolute anger. "Donovan! Snyder!" he shouted, his voice echoing down the hallway. "You two! Immediately surrender your badges, security passes, and any weapons you are carrying. You are suspended indefinitely, effective immediately. Follow these officers directly to headquarters, to the Internal Affairs Office. Do not communicate or speak to anyone until further notice. Is that clear?" Two other uniformed officers stepped forward and stripped Donovan and Snyder of their official belongings in a decisive manner. Kowalski and O'Connell, powerless to resist, obeyed with trembling hands and were led away like criminals in utter humiliation and despair. Commander Miller stayed behind, once again sincerely apologizing to Dr. Hayes. He offered all necessary assistance, from rescheduling flights, providing a separate waiting room, to sending a special security team to escort her. He pledged that a comprehensive investigation, closely coordinated with the FBI, would be conducted immediately to clarify responsibilities and thoroughly handle the wrongdoers. The airport security system, which was considered a protective wall, had just revealed a serious and alarming loophole. The incident at Dulles International Airport was no longer a simple internal disciplinary incident of the airport security agency. Because the victim was the wife of the FBI director, the Federal Bureau of Investigation officially stepped in, leading the investigation in coordination with relevant agencies such as the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and the airport's Internal Security Department. An interagency task force was urgently established with the goal of clarifying the whole truth and pursuing responsibility to the end. Dr. Vivian Hayes's detailed, precise, and weighty testimony was central to the case. She recounted the entire episode, from the unjust stop, the initial confusion, to the fabricated charges, threats, and outright extortion by Donovan and Snyder in the private security room. Given her standing and reputation, her testimony was virtually beyond doubt. Federal investigators quickly gathered and analyzed other evidence. Data from security cameras in the runway area, the VIP corridor, and especially in the private security screening room was extracted. Although Donovan may have deliberately chosen a location with few cameras, there was certainly still footage of them escorting Vivian away, or at least their presence in the area at the time of the incident. Data from Donovan and Snyder's radios and work logs were examined closely and found no credible intelligence on a suspect matching Dr. Hayes, nor were there any reports of additional security checks or any unusual findings on her, further supporting the accusation that they acted on their own and fabricated their reasons. Donovan's personal and work records were reviewed. Investigators found financial irregularities and previous complaints of bullying and discrimination, though they were not serious enough to warrant disciplinary action. Snyder, despite his cleaner record, also faced charges of complicity and failure to report his superior's crimes. Under the interrogation of experienced FBI agents, both Donovan and Snyder eventually had to bow their heads and admit their entire wrongdoing. Snyder may have cooperated and given more detailed statements in hopes of receiving leniency, clarifying Donovan's role as the mastermind and his extortion. The conclusion of the investigation was quick and clear. Mike Donovan and Rick Snyder had committed a series of serious crimes, including unlawful arrest, detention, abuse of power, Hobbs Act extortion conspiracy, a serious federal crime that targets extortion affecting interstate commerce, or the use of a public position, and possibly a civil rights violation due to the obvious racial bias in the original motive. Given the overwhelming evidence and serious nature of the case, especially the fact that it occurred at a key security location and the victim had a special connection to the head of the FBI, the United States Attorney's Office decided to prosecute both in the District of Columbia Federal Court. In parallel with the criminal investigation, the airport authority and the employer of Donovan and Snyder also quickly completed disciplinary proceedings. Both were permanently fired from their positions, losing all benefits and opportunities to work in the security or law enforcement fields in the future. The trial of Donovan and Snyder took place in federal court, with a degree of secrecy to protect Dr. Hayes' identity and privacy, but it still attracted great interest from officials and related agencies. With the overwhelming evidence and compelling testimony from Dr. Hayes, it did not take long for a federal jury to find both defendants guilty on all major counts. At the sentencing hearing, the federal judge expressed outrage at the defendants' depravity, corruption, and abuse of power, especially when it occurred at a critical infrastructure facility such as an international airport, which requires absolute trust and integrity from security personnel. The judge emphasized the dangers of extortion and the abuse of power. Taking into account all the aggravating factors, including the fact that the victim was targeted in part because of her race and gender, as well as the defendant's initial persistence, the court imposed a severe sentence to demonstrate deterrence. Mike Donovan, the mastermind and perpetrator of the extortion, was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Rick Snyder, who was an accomplice and may have been more cooperative during the investigation, received a slightly lighter sentence but still served 5 years. Justice, while it cannot undo the emotional trauma of the victims, was served in a strong and appropriate manner. The harsh sentences handed down to Mike Donovan and Rick Snyder have closed a dark chapter, but are also a strong affirmation of justice. 8 years in prison is not only a punishment for their crimes, but also a stern warning to all those holding public power, especially in sensitive areas such as security and law enforcement. Dr. Vivian Hayes, despite her horrific and haunting experience, has shown admirable strength and resilience. She did not let this incident defeat her. On the contrary, it has motivated her to speak out, to use her influence, albeit in a private way, to contribute to the fight against injustice, discrimination, and abuse of power in society. The incident has also made her and her husband, FBI Director Christopher Hayes, more cautious about personal security issues, more aware of the potential risks, even in the most seemingly safe environments. For Christopher Hayes, the heartbreaking incident that happened to his beloved wife has certainly strengthened his iron determination to eliminate corruption, misconduct, and raise ethical standards throughout the entire federal law enforcement system. The fates of Donovan and Snyder are a bitter lesson in the consequences of corruption. They lost everything because of greed, prejudice, and stupidity in challenging the law and abusing the power entrusted to them. Years in federal prison will be a long time for them to reflect on their fatal mistake. The scandal at Dulles International Airport forced airport management and related security agencies to conduct a comprehensive review of their work procedures, supervision practices, and especially their employee training programs. Mandatory courses on anti-racism, professional ethics, identifying and handling sensitive situations, as well as regulations on the use of body cameras, were strengthened and more strictly enforced. The incident is a painful reminder of the importance of building a security team that is not only professionally competent, but also ethical and respectful of all passengers. The lesson of this story is profound. It once again exposes the ugly truth that racism, abuse of power, and corruption can exist anywhere, even at the most important security gateways of the country. It shows the danger when power falls into the hands of corrupt people who are willing to use their positions to satisfy their own greed and prejudice. Justice was served swiftly and harshly, largely because of the special status of the victim. That provides a satisfying sense of accountability. But it does not erase the nagging question of equality of access to justice. Would an ordinary citizen, with no connection to those in power, receive the same protection and treatment when faced with a similar situation? The answer is probably uncertain, and that underscores the urgency of continuing efforts to reform the system, ensuring that any wrongdoing by public officials is dealt with fairly and severely, regardless of the victim. Never underestimate anyone, never let prejudice cloud your judgment, and never think that you are above the law. Because mistakes, no matter how small, can become fatal mistakes, leading to irreparable ruin. Justice, however slow or obscured at times, will eventually find its way to be served, especially when the truth is exposed and there is enough political will to pursue it to the end. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you like this content, please click like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next meaningful stories, because tomorrow we will have another meaningful story for you.